Are you debating whether or not you should warm your bike up before a ride? I was, until I discovered these reasons that totally transformed the way I warm my bike up, but also how I ride my bike every day. So in this video, I'm going to show you one critical reason you should warm your bike up, but also 4 insanely overlooked reasons you shouldn't waste your time or your fuel. We're going to take a look at reasons why you shouldn't warm your bike up, but first, let's reiterate the critical reason you should. I think we can all agree, the rev limiter is a happy place. But it goes without saying, sending that needle to the limiter immediately after starting the bike isn't a good idea. And we all know this, but why? Well, no matter what your bike is, whether it's new, old, Japanese, or Italian, not that it would start if it was Italian, but their engine components all have critical operating tolerances. Running an engine while it's still cold can cause certain components to operate at adverse tolerances. For example, when an engine is cold, the metal components, such as cylinder walls, pistons, and bearings, have not yet expanded to their normal operating sizes due to thermal expansion. And as a result, the clearances between these components might be larger than they are at operating temperature. So if you're heavy on the throttle before the engine has warmed up, you might just be causing very, very small accelerated wear, as critical parts are now moving around at very high speeds without their optimum clearances. Now, whilst this is a very legitimate reason to warm your bike up, there used to be a lot more, most of which just don't apply anymore, even when it's very, very, very cold outside. Not that you'd be riding when it's that cold out anyway, because nothing says thrill like fogging up your visor with each icy exhale while pretending it's not regret, but freedom. The next thing we're going to look at is an engineering marvel mystery, and I don't mean to be crude, but first, oil. Your engine needs oil. It lubricates the moving parts, reducing friction. This helps prevent wear, ensuring that the engine components operate smoothly and with longevity. Whoopsie. And whilst we all know that our engine needs oil, what good is it if we don't have oil pressure? You want to give the engine a little bit of time for oil pressure to develop and for the distribution of oil around the engine. But again, this was really for older engines, as they often had simpler and less efficient oiling systems compared to modern engines. These systems generally took longer to build up oil pressure. Therefore, unless your oil pump is FUBAR, this occurs incredibly quickly on modern engines, and is also indicated by this scary little oil pressure light. So really, by the time you've pulled your hand away from the start button, your bike's good to go. The harsh reality is, if this light consistently takes a while to turn off, or even worse, doesn't turn off at all, you've got serious problems. Problems far worse than wondering whether to warm your bike up or not. Problems like considering whether remortgaging your house to pay for a bottom-end rebuild is worth it or not. It absolutely is. The next thing we're going to look at is definitely the most controversial point on this list, but first, let's take a look at an ancient relic. This is a carburetor. Its primary job is to mix air and fuel in the correct proportion before delivering it to the engine's cylinders for combustion. And if you've ever owned a carbed bike, you'll know that they tend to run like until they've warmed up. It will idle weird and bog or stall if you open the throttle abruptly. This is because in cold conditions, the fuel may not vaporize as effectively, leading to poor fuel atomization. This means that the fuel doesn't mix well with air, resulting in an uneven air-fuel mixture. The solution is a choke system, which adds more fuel to compensate for the cold conditions. And then, well, you just wait until the engine has enough heat in it to keep the fuel vaporized. So yeah, with carbed bikes, you definitely need to warm them up. But most bikes nowadays aren't carbed. Most bikes are fuel injected, of which the ECU monitors engine temperature and a bunch of other key values using various sensors around the bike. This ensures a smooth idle and great throttle response right from startup. So as far as smooth running is concerned, there's no need to warm up your fuel injected bike. Just put fuel in it and off. This is engine oil, and we've already looked at why it's important, but do you have to worry about warming it up? The general consensus is that you should give your bike adequate time for the engine oil to warm up. This is because when it's cold, it won't flow properly. But this just isn't true. 10W40, which is a common bike oil, is a multi-grade oil. We know this because it has 2 numbers. The number before the W indicates the viscosity at a low temperature, for example, before you start the engine. The number after stands for the viscosity level at 100 degrees Celsius, which is around operating temperature. All oils have a resistance to flow. This is the oil's viscosity. However, like all liquid, this differs at any given temperature. However, modern oils are specifically designed to operate as intended at various temperatures, hence the 2 numbers. Now, I'm not denying that oil won't become thinner at higher temperatures. All I'm saying is that your engine was designed to operate using this specific oil, verifying the engine had an acceptable lifespan using this oil. So unless you're planning on ignoring the manufacturer's recommendations and years of specialist research, you're all good. The next thing I think is the most overlooked and critical part of warming your bike up, but first, let's recap. Like we saw at the start of the video, as long as you don't just jump on your bike and hit the red line immediately, you don't really need to warm your bike up. No matter where you're going or what you're doing, as long as you take it easy until the temperature gauge is in the happy spot, you're good to go. And this also has other critical benefits, because the way I see it, the engine isn't the only thing that you want to warm up. There's very little use in having an engine that's ready for race mode if your tyres are still ice cold. Yeah, your engine will be ready, but your tyres won't. And I think we all know how that ends. But more importantly, you need a chance to warm up yourself. If you're not on form, you're more likely to make a mistake, especially if you haven't been out in a while and you're a bit rusty. Nothing says smart decisions like riding on cold tyres after several months of hibernation. Personally, I've always started the engine, then faffed around with my helmet and gloves for a few minutes, and then ride off. It lets the engine warm up for a tad and doesn't waste any time that I wouldn't have used anyway. Then I take the first part of the ride nice and easy to let the other important parts warm up as well. Knowing whether to warm your bike up is critical, but how you use your bike every day is just as important, because it can significantly change your everyday bike life. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you in this video here, where we look at 5 hacks every motorcyclist should know.